House Republican Whip Steve Scalise is slamming Joe Biden's multiple border crises. He was pictured carrying a milk carton with a photo of Vice President Kamala Harris that read, "Missing at the border, Biden nor Harris have been to the border to witness the multiple crises they created." Joining me now to discuss, Florida Congresswoman Cammack. Congresswoman, great to see you and meet you. Congresswoman Harris, Vice President Harris, I should say, announced she will be visiting Mexico and Guatemala. Now, given her administration's support of illegal immigration, perhaps she thinks that's where our southern border is, you know, all the way down there in those countries, because all you see is the people just coming through. But in all seriousness, her ignorance aside, Americans are kind of sick and tired of a lawless government that doesn't follow its own laws.
Absolutely. And it's good to see you too, Chris. You know, just yesterday, I think Vice President Harris announced that she would be traveling to New Hampshire, which I had to sit back and think for a minute. Isn't that the wrong border state? You know, it's absolutely mind-boggling to me that this administration, one, refuses to acknowledge that there is, in fact, a crisis of epic proportions happening on our southwest border. It is a crisis. It is an emergency. They're choosing to ignore it, but we all know that ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. We're taught that as children. And so it goes to show that this administration is refusing to lead. They are either not capable of or choose not to. Neither is acceptable. And as someone who has been to the border twice to see firsthand just how awful and horrendous conditions truly are from a public health standpoint, from a humanitarian standpoint, from a national security standpoint, and you've got border agents begging for the administration to listen to them. I mean, heck, even Secretary Mayorkas, he said he went to McAllen, Texas. That coward didn't even leave the airport. He forced the Border Patrol agents to report in out of the field to the airport so that he could talk to them. This is insane. And so it's incumbent upon us as representatives to keep holding this administration, their feet to the fire. It's unconscionable, the fact that we have this crisis happening. This is not a seasonal surge. This is the most horrific humanitarian crisis that we have ever seen on the southwest border. And it's about time they just start by calling it what it is, a crisis.
Yep, humanitarian crisis, public health crisis, national security crisis. This weekend, while speaking to reporters, Biden finally called the situation on the southern border a crisis. He didn't have a teleprompter with him. He kind of went off script. But the White House came back later in the morning, quote unquote, clarifying to CNN that Biden's use of crisis doesn't represent the White House's official position. Now, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. The guy who is allegedly occupying the Oval Office, he is supposed to be setting policy, but he just took a stance that isn't commensurate to what the White House says. Isn't this the White House admitting that Joe Biden isn't setting policy?
Oh, that's exactly what this is. He is absolutely not in charge. It is all those around him that are really controlling what's happening in the White House. And, you know, it's just this game that they've been playing. We've seen this with Press Secretary Psaki. She has said repeatedly that this is a situation, it is a challenge. Well, when I asked Secretary Mayorkas in a Homeland Security hearing if FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been deployed to the border as they were, doesn't that constitute an emergency? And he said no. This is what is so ridiculous. Words apparently don't matter. And for an administration that is so woke that it can't even stand itself, the words that they're saying just really don't matter, which is, I think, a little bit hypocritical and pretty scary considering what we're dealing with on the southwest border.
Yeah,
Crazy.
You think? Yeah, a lot hypocritical. Okay, there are growing calls to impeach California socialist Maxine Waters for her continued calls for violence, yet Pelosi tolerates those calls for violence. Let me ask you your opinion, Congresswoman. Do you think it's time that Waters go?
Absolutely. You know, we saw what she did in 2018 when she called for violence against members of President Trump's cabinet, and she wasn't held accountable then. But this is the liberal left's playbook. It is rules for thee, but not for me. They want to strip Republican members of their committees because of words that they said previous to being a member in office. Now we have members that are currently in office saying outrageous things, inciting violence, and there's zero consequence for that. Americans are sick and tired of this double standard. So our Republican conference, we're working on a solution of what we can do collectively as a body to address this and make sure that Maxine Waters is held accountable. But more than that, my office, we are sending a letter to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook demanding that her accounts be removed because they claimed that President Trump incited violence. So why is that standard not being applied to Maxine Waters for her comments that she made in Minneapolis? Exactly.
Amen. Amen. Congresswoman, I appreciate having you here on the Chris Salcedo Show. Keep us posted. I'm wondering what Twitter is going to say to you and the other socials.